Hi everyone, and welcome to Huddly Q&A session. This session is being filmed on our L1 camera with the speaker framing that we talked about in the presentation. So we're super pleased to test this out for this Q&A. So we look forward to receiving your questions during the next quarter or half hour or so. Please welcome.
Okay, so we have a first question. You say that you're going to end up in the low end of the current revenue and gross margin guiding. What are the main uncertainty factors reflecting this view?
Well, there are factors on many levels and many moving parts. At least for the high level, I would say the macro political level is what causes indirect and direct changes to the assumptions that we base our estimates on.
And we base our current outlook on the current FX. And another factor to add is perhaps the channel's performance, as we are addressing in the presentation, and our focus on improving that performance.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on to the next question. When do you expect to see first revenue from sale of software?
Q4 with launching or with the launch of speaker framing.
Okay, next question. When do you expect to be cash flow positive?
We won't give a specific timeline on that, but we want to make it clear that our ambition is to revive the profitable growth track.
Question number 4. You mentioned the ratio between revenue and capitalized R&D. How do you see this developing over time?
Yeah, so that ratio may go up and it may go down, and it depends obviously on the sales, but also how much we invest. And Huddly is based on R&D investments. Over the years, we have invested a lot, and we will invest heavily because developing IP is at the core of what we do.
And typically, the Huddly Studio that we announced in the report took almost 3 years, and quite a few employees being involved in that project. So it takes time to pull this project through the organization and into the market.
Okay, next question. Can you give some color on the uptick in margins from Q1 2022 to Q2 2022? Is this the direction that we will see going forward?
So we expect the margins to stay within the guided range as we commented on at the low end in the rest of the year, and perhaps we see an uptick towards the end of the year. I think that's what we can comment on that question.
Yes.
Okay, and then we have a question here. How is your approach in order to maximize sales going forward? In particular, it would be interesting if you can go into some depth on how you interact with customers in order to adapt technological development to commercial needs.
That sounds like a question for you, Alexander.
Well, I could probably go on for hours, but I think it's best to answer this with a kind of practical example. So if you take what's going on now after the pandemic and the hybrid space and the kind of new norms being involved, I think kind of the best example to describe this is how we work with Huddly Studio. So currently you see kind of Microsoft and many of the technology platform players, they are creating these room archetypes where we're supposed to bend the meeting rooms to fit the technology, basically making traditional meeting rooms be very practical unless it's a digital or hybrid meeting room, which, no, in our sense, it should be the other way around. You have to bend technology to fit the meeting room, right? So it's a very kind of practical example of where, for example, the Huddly Studio, the multi-camera solution, will enable the kind of features that is currently intended with changing and adapting the physical room. So we intend for the technology to solve that problem, for these meetings to be fully inclusive, fully immersive, and so on. So it's a very practical example of a kind of huge thing going on now in the market that we started on, and we saw this problem earlier, but it's just being amplified with the pandemic and the hybrid norms coming. So it's a very kind of good product market fit for this project that will be launched early next year. And I think will I think it will dilute lots of headaches going on in the enterprise market.
Okay, on to the next question. And I think that's adding to what you just said. Given the strong expected market growth, key players are likely to increase their focus on the video conferencing segment going forward. How well are you positioned in the potential case of a competitor delivering a similar software solution?
I think the core value of this company is really the strategic value, the IP, the R&D, and that's why you kind of invest so heavily into that. This has enabled us, from a historical point of view, enabled us to be the first mover in the fully digital pan-tilt zoom camera. And the same goes with experience with the multi-camera solution that we're deploying next year. So for us, it's about to be early, but it's not only to be early, it's also to sustain that position. But still, from kind of a general point of view, I would say competition is good because that also helps drive the markets towards the norms that makes it easier to adapt the solutions we're basically providing.
Okay, so I think this is our final question for the day. No, it's coming in. You are shifting the focus from prioritizing revenue growth over margins to margins over revenue growth. Why this change?
Yeah, that's let's perhaps be a bit more precise on our intention there. I think in Q1 we talked a lot about growth, but that was not intended to be by sacrificing margins at all. So that's a bit on us being more precise in our communication, Alexander.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that what we wanted to share with the market is the understanding of, in a challenging supply chain situation, it's a kind of cost of continuity. So for us to sustain the momentum and continuity, it means also being absorbing kind of the purchase price variances that we elaborated on in the last quarter. But we're also transitioning from a period where the market has valued growth a lot higher than they do currently. So it's also adjusting to that. So it's not like growth at any price. We need to make sure that we see the margins catching up, and that will be a high priority forward. But that doesn't mean growth is less a priority. It's as high as priority because we do believe the future success for this company comes in the market position and our ability to capture market share, and that will continue to remain a high priority. But channel sales and software monetization will be imperative to drive margin back into attractive position.
So we got a new question. What has happened in the channel segment, and what are you going to do to fix it?
Maybe I should start also. So what has happened? So I think you can comment that could link to our overall margin being down 15 percentage points compared to the same period last year, and that's related to our product mix. So we're selling products with a different margin than 1 year ago. Alexander, you may want to increase.
Yeah, I would say that in the channels we also fit together with a broader product ecosystem, right? So we are being kitted up with products from kind of channel partners or meeting channel partners. So it's not only about whether or not we are able to supply our products, but it's also kind of whether or not our kind of partners' products are able to kind of supply at the same level. So the supply chain issues did affect us quite heavily the last year and into this year. But more importantly, we do believe we have what it takes to drive channels back into position. And when I say back into position, it's not that we lost a position. It's more that we want to make sure that we catch up on the same trend as we see with the strategic partners. But we're less of control of the destiny in terms of all the kind of components that these kind of products are being kitted up with downstream.
And perhaps add to this that in terms of margins from a cost perspective, we see rising inflation in the market, and it's a bit of a time delay from rising input cost to raising prices in the market, but we do expect to adjust our prices to reflect the inflation environment.
Yeah, and I would also say add to that the suppliers of sound and so on, kind of broader product ecosystem out in the market, has started to adapt to the supply chain situation. So we expect that to stabilize. At the same time, we have to make sure that our organization is fully equipped to be able to capture market share, because we can and we will grow channels going forward.
Okay, next question. Can you shed some light on how you interact with potential or existing customers and partners in order to optimize the adaptation of your products in development to the market needs?
Well, that's a similar question to the first one. So we have two, to simplify it, we have two venues. We have the strategics, and the strategics is very embedded into engineering. So working with kind of Google and Crestron and so on is a very, very tight loop between feedback loop that goes straight into engineering, and we kind of share knowledge and we kind of work on various use cases together. And that insight is provided into kind of overall engineering approach that helps us kind of make products that we also can push out in the channels. The channels value chain is more complex, where you have distributors, resellers, and then you have kind of end users. So our sales approach in the channels is being more directly involved with the end users to fuel the sales out and kind of drive demand. So, but it's a long and complex answer to that. So I think from a customer feedback point of view, it's really kind of how we're adapting to these kind of two venues very differently. One being very engineering driven, but a very tight feedback loop, and the other one is very being sales driven on the channels, where we are working close with our customers, also taking feedback by driving demand that way.
Okay, so we got a question on the backlog. How much of the backlog is expected to be delivered during 2022?
Maybe I can start commenting on the backlog, and as we allude to in the presentation as well, the backlog comes with a bit of uncertainty, and in our view, backlog is not to be interpreted as a confirmation of future revenue. And I think that's what I intend to comment on that. Alexander, maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of two factors. I mean, part of it is of course demand, but also part of it is how people adapt to the supply chain situation the same way we do, right? So it's hard to derive like a specific answer from interpreting that alone.
Okay, I think that concludes the questions for today. Any last words?
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing your questions and for listening in, and look forward to catching up on the next presentation, Q3. Thank you.